even if a convicted criminal. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party.
Maybe that 5-point spread in the New York Times poll and our poll is not quite accurate.
Hey everyone, it's David, producer for The Benjamin Dixon Show, and like it or not. So Super Tuesday has come and gone, and no real surprises. It pretty much went as expected. We essentially have two candidates running, and their parties see them as incumbents. Biden is the real incumbent because he's currently president, but the Republican Party is treating Donald Trump like an incumbent. So he's sweeping all the states. Nikki Haley won one state, the state of Vermont, and she dropped out. Biden won every state and territory except for American Samoa, which was a surprise one, but also a very small one. It does make history because he's the first incumbent Democratic president to lose a primary contest since Jimmy Carter. And on his side, Dean Phillips, who was the remaining candidate on the Democrat side, dropped out. So it's a race between Trump and Biden. And nobody really wants that. So no real surprises. But is the media being honest? Is what you're hearing about the results and the exit polls? And are they giving you the actual facts uncompromised? Well, I'm not sure how anyone can really say the media is being liberal or biased to Biden because, honestly, coverage about the results for him were just casting doubt about his candidacy all around.
The one who has the issue right now with the base is more Biden than Trump.
President Biden is underperforming some of his benchmarks.
Now, one could say that maybe they were doing all they could to be critical of Trump, which would be, I guess, in the liberal vein, because they were searching for any piece of data that they could, and then they claimed not to really be able to find anything.
His support in the general election polls among Republicans really isn't showing any slack.
You ended up having some good chunk of Haley voters say that they might not support the Republican nominee come November. A lot of the Nikki Haley voters, it does seem to be Biden or Democratic voters.
Virginia, we asked, if Donald Trump is convicted of a crime, is he still fit for the presidency? 53%, a majority of Republican primary voters, say yes. North Carolina, even more so. 64% of this is Donald Trump's Republican Party.
But wait, let's stay on that last point real quick. CNN's political director saying that this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. I'm going to play the full clip for you, and let's really look at the numbers that he's talking about. Not so much what he's saying, but the numbers, and if they reflect the Republican Party being Donald Trump's party.
And a sense of the electorate showing up in these Republican presidential primaries. We asked, do you consider yourself part of the MAGA movement? In Virginia, only 31% of Republican primary voters in these early numbers, and these will change throughout the night as more surveys come in, say that yes, 31% say yes, they're part of the MAGA movement, but 6 in 10, 59% of Republican primary voters in Virginia say no, they're not part of the MAGA movement. That's the least MAGA electorate we've seen in primaries to date. It looks more similar to what we saw in New Hampshire. In North Carolina, it's a little more MAGA-fied, if you will. 39% say yes, they consider themselves to be a part of the MAGA movement. 54% say they are not. Back to Virginia, we asked, if Donald Trump is convicted of a crime, is he still fit for the presidency? 53%, a majority of Republican primary voters, say yes. Donald Trump is still fit for the presidency, even if he is convicted of a crime. 40% say no. In North Carolina, even more so. 64% of Republican primary voters in the Tar Heel state are saying, yes, Trump is fit for the presidency, even if a convicted criminal. Only 32% will say he is not. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party.
Is it really Donald Trump's party, though? I mean, without question, it is the party of Trumpism. They have owned Trump's policies and whatever you might call his ideology. But more and more, because of Trump's baggage, the party definitely seems to be wanting to find someone else to carry the torch of Trumpism. Notice how they look at the majority and say the majority is supporting Trump. But how much of a majority? It'd be different if those polls were saying 80%, 85%.
Back to Virginia, we asked, if Donald Trump is convicted of a crime, is he still fit for the presidency? 53%, a majority of Republican primary voters, say yes. Donald Trump is still fit for the presidency, even if he is convicted of a crime. 40% say no. In North Carolina, even more so. 64% of Republican primary voters in the Tar Heel state are saying, yes, Trump is fit for the presidency, even if a convicted criminal. Only 32% will say he is not.
The majority of voters in those Republican primaries, and mind you, the polls weren't closed during that segment. And while the majority were saying that Trump is fit to be president regardless of his criminal cases, only 53% said that in Virginia. 40% said he was not fit. In North Carolina, 54% said they weren't MAGA. And while more, 64% said that Trump would be fit for office, still 32%, nearly a third, were saying that Trump isn't fit for president. So is it really Trump's party? Because among the people that aren't MAGA and say he's not fit, are they going to vote for Trump in the general election? And that's really the big question. They may not vote for Biden, as we'll look at it in a second. Maybe they stay home. And then the question is, who stays home and doesn't vote for Biden? But the point here is that while you'll see the media calling out Biden facing a big chunk of uncommitted votes, they're not framing it the same for Trump, although Trump is facing potentially bigger numbers of uncommitted and anti-Trump pushback. Here's MSNBC looking at the framing in that way.
Over the last few days, we've had 4 national polls come out showing small leads for Donald Trump. But what's interesting in those polls is you ask Republicans in a Trump-Biden matchup, who are you supporting? And in these polls, here it is, 91-6, 92-5, 96-4. Trump, this is Trump's share with Republicans in general election polling.
Notice how when it actually comes down to who they're voting for and not what their ideologies are, CNN was looking at their ideologies and their opinions. But when it comes to voting, they're looking at national polls, not state polls. That's significant because while state polls can tell you the mood of the country, the presidency is not determined by popular vote. It's not winner takes all based on the majority of the vote count nationally. It's based on each individual state and the Electoral College. Because reminder, Trump has actually never won the popular vote, ever. He didn't win in 2016, even though he won the Electoral College, which is what got him into the White House, and he didn't win in 2020. He's also never really won midterms. The endorsements that he made in the midterm in 2018 as well as in 2022, his endorsements didn't really fare the way that he claims they did. So the national polls don't really give a good preview or forecast of what an election is going to look like. You have to look at the states. And yes, a lot of the state, but as we know, really ever since Trump arrived on the political stage, the polls have not gotten it right.
That result leading me to think maybe that 5-point spread in the New York Times poll, in our poll, and the head-to-head matchup is not quite accurate. Maybe the enthusiasm for Joe Biden is, as their campaign has been claiming, bigger than we think once it was a binary choice.
The biggest conclusion is this is going to be a very competitive race.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that people are enthusiastic about a Biden candidacy. I would think that that's a stretch. But we have consistently seen, if you look at actual poll data, not the headlines and not what articles say the polls say, but actual poll data, when you look up the polls, one of the key questions that has been asked is, what is your top issue? And it lists several. It lists immigration, it lists border, it lists economy, and it lists preserving democracy. And every time among independents especially, preserving democracy has either been the top issue or the second issue. One other thing that he said in that clip at the end is that a lot of Nikki Haley voters are Biden voters or Democrats. To be sure, in some of the states, a percentage of that is accurate because some of the states are open primaries where you don't have to be registered to a party to vote. And while what I'm about to show you isn't a scientific poll, it's just 2 anecdotes where voters were asked, I want to show you what 2 Republicans said and then come back.
What made you switch from Trump to Nikki Haley?
The man is a lunatic, and I think he's terrible for the country.
What are you thinking about when you say that?
Just that he lies, he cheats, he's bankrupted millions of businesses and people, and I don't see anything good about him.
Let me ask, if Donald Trump is the nominee in November, do you support Joe Biden over Donald Trump?
Nope.
Why Nikki Haley?
Two reasons. One, I think she would do a very good job. And two, I think Donald Trump is a threat to the well-being of our country.
Now, the woman, the first voter, said that she thinks Trump is not fit. And she said at the end she wouldn't vote for Biden. But whether they asked if she would vote for Trump and didn't show it or didn't ask, that's the key thing. Does she stay home and not vote if Trump is the nominee? Is she going to vote for Trump? Because that will make a difference. The same thing for the second voter, the man, who was an outright Nikki Haley supporter. Nikki Haley dropped out now. So who's he going to vote for? And they didn't show that question being asked if they asked it. They didn't ask, will you still support Trump? Now, while those are only 2 voters out of millions, this is the key thing. And look, we are 8 months out from the election. These polls don't say a whole lot. The exit polls tell us more than the actual national polls do because they're local state responses. But I think what the vote is going to come down to are independent voters, unlikely voters, female voters, and black voters. Independent and unlikely voters are going to be that deciding factor depending on which way they sway. The female vote is significant because right now, abortion and bodily autonomy are big issues. We're seeing real issues impact real life when it comes to reproductive rights and reproductive health. And obviously, it's not just limited to the female vote, it's also relevant for gay couples and the trans community. And I know what a lot of audience is going to bring up, and that's Israel and Palestine. And for very good reason. That being said, while I do think the Biden campaign better be getting the message because of what the uncommitted votes are telling them, if you look at the polls, Israel is still favored by the American populace. Not me, Jew here, and I'm very much critical of Israel. But we can look at just one poll as an example. A poll by New York Times and Siena College from the 25th through the 28th of February asked likely electorate voters in the dispute between Israel and Palestinians, which side do you sympathize with more, Israel or the Palestinians? Those responding among the likely electorate category said Israel 43%, Palestinians 23%, and then one key part is those who refused or didn't know. My guess is most of them didn't want to speak on it and refused, and there are 20% there. But even without that, support for Israel is double that of the Palestinians, unfortunately. So just some thoughts about what we're looking at, what the climate and the environment is here. You can let us know what you think about all of this in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And as always, we'll be back.